I did an immediate reaction to this Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder trilogy fight, but in this video, I want to go into slightly more depth in terms of a technical breakdown and a tactical breakdown, what went right and what went wrong for both fighters. Deontay Wilder talked about the importance of remaining calm before this fight. He said that emotions can cloud his judgment, but all of that went out the window as soon as he got in the ring against Tyson Fury for this trilogy fight. He was extremely uptight and intense, and he was emotionally invested in revenge. I need to get him back. I need to get him back. You could see it in his eyes, and you could see it in his actions. You should never go into a fight with someone as clever as Tyson Fury emotionally invested in revenge. You shouldn't be thinking about revenge at all. You should simply be focused on implementing your tactics and getting the job done. Prior to the fight, I spoke about Deontay Wilder's magic feather, this myth that his team had got him to believe in, that Tyson Fury had cheated last time out. Now, this did work to some degree in helping him to regain confidence, believing that Tyson Fury wouldn't be able to inflict that same type of damage on a level playing field. But it's a double-edged sword, because the fact that he believed Tyson Fury had cheated only served to make him angry, and he carried that into the fight. Deontay was throwing every shot with maximum power. He was jabbing to the body and throwing right hands to the body in an attempt to set up the right hand to the head. And that's a nice setup in principle, but his execution of it was absolutely terrible. He made it way too obvious. This is a setup which requires patience and subtlety. You don't come roaring out in the first round, throwing a million jabs and right hands to the body with maximum power in every shot. Any elite level fighter is going to know exactly what you're trying to do straight away, especially a guy who's fought you twice before. And you're not going to overpower him because he's naturally bigger and stronger than you. So what on earth are you doing? You have to take your time, vary the power on your shots, and box your way into a fight if you want to use that type of setup. You can't force it. But that's exactly what Deontay Wilder was doing. He tried to force it, and that gave the game away immediately. One of the most common things you'll hear trainers telling fighters is to stop looking for the knockout. Just relax, go with the flow, and the knockout will present itself. In fact, I'm sure a slick fighter like Malik Scott would have told Deontay Wilder this in training camp, but evidently Wilder is hard of hearing and even harder of learning. Wilder tried to condense a setup which would normally be implemented over the course of several rounds into about 60 seconds. It was a perfect example of how not to set up a right hand against Tyson Fury. And to add insult to injury, he was telegraphing the right hand by cocking it back every time before he threw it, which made Fury's job that much easier. Prior to the fight, I spoke about tactics I thought Deontay should use in this trilogy fight. I never said that he would use these tactics. I said that he should. And the tactics were to come in light, stay outside of punching range, and use the ring. Lots of lateral movement. Bide his time and try to draw Tyson Fury onto shots. I used Devarel Williamson's approach against Vladimir Klitschko as a reference point. His whole training camp should have been focused around foot speed, lots of lateral movement, and countering with the right hand. But evidently, Deontay's mindset didn't allow for such tactics because he did the exact opposite. He tried to use the exact same tactics as last time, only this time he was heavier and stronger. But the problem is, a 220-pound man can bulk himself up through weightlifting to 240 pounds, but he won't have the stamina of a man who's naturally 240 pounds. So he might be able to match him for strength for a couple rounds, but all that extra muscle that his body wasn't designed to carry will tire him out very quickly. And that's exactly what happened to Wilder in this fight. The combination of Wilder wasting lots of energy by putting maximum power on every shot early on, being mentally and emotionally wound up and focused on revenge, and the extra weight he was carrying all served to sap his energy within a couple rounds, at which point Fury was able to pick up where he left off last time, pushing Wilder back and bullying him again. When Wilder did have success in the 4th round, where he dropped Fury twice, it was when he managed to walk Tyson Fury onto a shot. He didn't force it. He didn't go looking for it. He let Fury walk onto it. And it wasn't a setup either. He was just instinctively throwing punches back to try and stave off the oncoming Fury and managed to tag him clean with a right hand in the process. Wilder should have focused his entire camp and his entire strategy on engineering these types of scenarios, letting Fury come forward and walking him onto shots. He's done it in many previous fights, like against Ortiz, Spilka, and so on. Furthermore, Fury has been caught that way in several previous fights. And I'm not talking about against Wilder. When he fought Steve Cunningham back in the day, he was walked onto a right hand. When he fought Nevin Pikage way back in the day, he was walked onto a right hand, etc. Now, in this particular instance, when Fury was first dropped in the 4th round against Wilder in this trilogy fight, it was a miscalculation on Fury's behalf. He got caught in no man's land with the left side of his head exposed. Meaning, if you're going to have your left hand down, you need to be either all the way outside of Wilder's range, where you're too far away for him to land the right hand, or right up on his chest, where he doesn't have enough space to get the right hand off. Coincidentally, it was the exact same mistake Anthony Fowler made in the Liam Smith fight, which resulted in the first knockdown. Now, I spoke to a friend of mine the day after the fight, and he said that from what he saw, Wilder was no better this time than he was last time out. He might have been a little stronger for a round or two with the extra muscle, but technically and tactically, it was the same old Wilder. He said the only difference he noticed was that Fury wasn't as good this time, wasn't as sharp, and wasn't in quite as good a shape. And I tend to agree with that. Before the fight, it seemed clear to me and many others that Fury wasn't as up for this fight as he was for the previous fight. You could see it in his eyes. A lot of people clearly misread Tyson Fury's performance, and that's what I'm going to call it, a performance, at the press conference and at the weigh-in, where he was trash talking and acting all aggressive. There was a few people that left comments on my pre-fight video saying, "I don't know what you're talking about, Hatman. Fury seems far more up for this fight than he was the last fight because that's the most aggressive I've ever seen him at a press conference towards an opponent." Well, anybody can act aggressive. And as I explained in my pre-fight videos, my interpretation of what Fury was doing is he was trying to gear himself up for the fight. He was trying to get a rise out of Deontay Wilder. That's why he was acting so aggressive. But inside, he didn't feel as keyed up. He didn't feel as up for the fight as he was for the previous fight. That's my interpretation of what it was. And when he got in the ring, I think that that proved to be true because he was far less aggressive in the early rounds against Deontay Wilder than he was in the last fight. You could tell by the look in his eyes, by the expression on his face, as well as the fact that he was more circumspect. Last time, he was very comfortable boxing on the outside early in the fight. But this time, he tried to avoid boxing on the outside for the first couple rounds and just focused on defense. If you notice, the first time he landed a punch in the first round, he clinched immediately afterwards to smother any counterattack from Wilder, but also to lean his weight on him and try to sap him of that early aggression. He wasn't as keen this time around of trading shots at long range early in the fight. And again, this was down to the fact that he wasn't as sharp this time, in my view. Wasn't quite as up for it, wasn't quite in as good a shape as last time out. Once he'd drawn Wilder's sting, he became more aggressive, but he was far more focused on inside fighting than he was in the last fight. The more tired Wilder got, the more comfortable Fury was at throwing power shots at long range as well. Fury was feinting a lot as usual, and that's especially effective against a guy like Wilder who's emotionally wound up, who's putting maximum power into every shot. You feint him a few times and you've got him to swing and miss several times, which not only depletes his energy, but also gives you the opportunity to counter. After 5 rounds, Fury really had a sitting duck in front of him. A guy who was completely exhausted, was telegraphing all his punches, and who had no defense at all. Fury was able to do what he wanted at that point, and it was only down to Wilder's immense bravery and toughness that the fight went on as long as it did. You could also mention the fact that the ref and Wilder's corner were unwilling to stop the fight, probably due to the fallout from the previous fight. From a technical point of view, this was certainly not the most difficult fight of Tyson Fury's career. He's had far more complex puzzles to solve in the past, and I'm sure he will do in the future. Fury really didn't have to be that technical. His defense was still slick, slipping and sliding on the inside, up close and at long range, but his offense didn't have to be particularly sophisticated. He was just able to bulldoze forward and maul Deontay Wilder. Anyway, all in all, it was an exciting contest, a good performance from Tyson Fury, but certainly not his best performance in my view. He's performed better in the past, and I expect we'll see him perform better in the future as well. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next one.